Carl Jung, an early 20th century psychiatrist, is perhaps best known for founding analytic psychology and psychotherapy. Early in his career, Jung worked alongside Freud, although after 5 years of collaboration, they parted due to differences in opinion. In 1921, a few years after leaving the world of psychoanalysis, Jung published the book Shakeology, Psychological Types, outlining his theory of the human psyche. Jung said that ultimately, everyone is an exception to their type, since the full individuality of a person cannot be properly captured by formulas. However, people share some common general patterns, and it was these that he set out to describe. For his classification of psychological types, Jung began with 2 broad categories, extroversion and introversion. People, he observed, could be classified based on their attitude towards the external world. The extrovert directs their attention to the outside world, to objective happenings. The introvert, on the other hand, is aware of the external world but focuses on internal, subjective happenings. In either case, the introverted or extroverted attitude can be seen from an early age, before any ego development occurs. But Jung was not satisfied with just these 2 categories. They seemed woefully incomplete. So Jung went on to outline 4 basic psychological functions: sensation, thinking, feeling, and intuition. The function of sensation is the function concerned with the 5 senses and tells a person that something exists. Thinking tells what a thing is. It adds a name. Feeling tells a person what the value of the thing is, what it is worth. This is different from emotions, which are accompanied by physiological responses to the body. Emotions have a physical manifestation, such as sweating or increased heart rate, while feelings are purely mental. Lastly, intuition is responsible for hunches. It is easily mixed up with the feeling function, since it is often described as a type of feeling, but intuition is not a value judgment. Intuition is a type of perception, albeit one that does not go by the 5 senses. It operates via the unconscious mind. These functions exist on 2 axes, where the opposing functions cannot be both used at the same time. Thinking and feeling, the 2 rational or decision-making functions, are on one axis. The other axis is made up of sensation and intuition, the 2 irrational or perception-based functions. One of these 4 functions is the most preferred and natural way for a person to adapt to the world, and this is the person's dominant or superior function. This function is conscious and has the attitude of introversion or extroversion. Jung described the psyche as having a self-balancing nature, where the opposite attitude governs the unconscious. Therefore, when a person's dominant function is extroverted, the unconscious functions are introverted. The opposite is true of a person with a dominant introverted function. This way, the unconscious compensates for the one-sidedness of the conscious attitude, preventing a person from becoming too extreme. The opposing function to the dominant one is subconsciously repressed, since it threatens the smooth operation of the dominant function. The inferior function can't be completely destroyed, so it still affects the person, though they may not recognize its effects, or may outright deny its influence. Still, the more the inferior is denied, the stronger its unconscious hold on a person becomes. This does not imply that one function is better than the other, since each side is equally important in navigating the world. Like a pencil, both sides are useful, but for different purposes. The one side writes, the other erases. This mirrors the use of the dominant and inferior functions. The dominant function guides the sort of mark the person leaves, while the inferior function makes up for its deficits. Still, it's not perfect. Sometimes the dominant function represses the inferior function to the point of conflict, where the inferior tries to reassert itself by erupting into the person's ego, their conscious self. This creates subclinical but unhealthy and self-sabotaging patterns of behavior. From these principles, Jung outlined 8 basic psychological types: extroverted thinking, extroverted feeling, extroverted sensing, extroverted intuition, introverted thinking, introverted feeling, introverted sensing, and introverted intuition. Jung acknowledged that these types rarely occur in pure forms. To these ends, he described the principle of auxiliary functions. People have a function that is not quite as developed as the dominant function, but is also present in consciousness. That is, under the control of the person's will. This function will support the dominant function, and gives variations on the pure type. The auxiliary function can never be the opposing function to the dominant one, since they are 2 antagonistic to each other's operation, but it can be either of the remaining 2. For example, A thinking type may have sensation or intuition as the auxiliary function, but never feeling. The auxiliary function serves as a means of development for the individual, a pathway to developing the rest of their lower functions. Though the functions can't all be equally valued in the ego, one can develop the lower functions, which helps them work towards individuation, fulfilling their potential by becoming their fully realized self. Carl Jung's works have been influential not only in psychiatry but in popular culture as well. It is from Jung that we get the now common notions of archetypes, introverts, extroverts, and the collective unconscious. Interpretation of his work by Isabel Briggs Myers and Catherine Cook Briggs created the popular MBTI personality assessment. His ideas are not unchallenged. The current scientific model of personality is the Big Five, and the existence of the collective unconscious and archetypes is debated. However, Jung's work has still left a lasting impression across many fields, from psychiatry and psychology to anthropology and literature studies.